Let's set the scene. The year is 1857. For 100 years, the British East India Company has been the dominant power in India, but everything is about to change. What started as a soldier's mutiny suddenly explodes into a massive, full-blown rebellion that threatens to burn down the entire British enterprise. This is the story of that incredible year. Our story really kicks off in a city called Meerut in May of 1857. Now, things were tense, for sure, but the East India Company, they thought they had it all under control. They figured they could handle anything. Well, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. The rebellion didn't just start, it erupted, with the speed and violence that caught them completely by surprise. I mean, just think about how fast this all happened. On May 9th, you have 85 soldiers being jailed. That's a local disciplinary issue. The very next day, their comrades don't just protest, they bust them out of jail, attack their officers, and immediately start marching to Delhi, the old imperial capital. And by the 11th, they're in the city, and they've convinced the last Mughal emperor to be their leader. Just like that, a mutiny becomes a revolution.
Okay, so you've got to be wondering, how on earth did it come to this? I mean, a whole rebellion can't just happen because of some rifle cartridges, right? Absolutely not. This explosion of fury had been building for years, for decades, really. It was fueled by this deep, simmering resentment. So, to really get what happened, we need to go back and look at what was feeding that fire.
Yeah, this thing didn't just pop up out of nowhere. For years, the East India Company's policies had been pushing people to the brink. We're talking about political grievances, economic ruin, and really personal stuff, things that touched on culture and religion. It was basically a giant powder keg just sitting there, waiting for a spark. And the amazing thing is how widespread the anger was. This wasn't just one group of unhappy people. It was pretty much everyone. I mean, look at this breakdown. You have rulers like Rani Lakshmibai, who were literally having their kingdoms stolen from them. You have peasants and landowners losing lands that had been in their families for generations because of insane taxes. And then you have the sepoys, the company's own soldiers, who felt totally disrespected and betrayed. Every single group had a powerful reason to fight back. So let's dig into the political side of things first. One of the main tools the British used was this policy called the Doctrine of Lapse. Now, here's how it worked. If an Indian ruler died without a direct male heir, their kingdom was just gone. The British would absorb it. This totally ignored the Indian tradition of adopting an heir, which was a huge deal. This is exactly what happened to Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi. Her request to let her adopted son take over was just flat out denied. And they didn't stop with the smaller kingdoms. The company was systematically trying to erase the most powerful symbol of Indian authority, the Mughal dynasty itself. First, they took the emperor's name off the coins. Then they announced that after the current emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, passed away, his family would be kicked out of the historic Red Fort. And the final insult, the governor-general declared that Zafar would be the last Mughal king. After him, his sons would just be called princes. Ouch. So you've got this double whammy happening. On the one hand, the company's economic policies were absolutely devastating the countryside. Peasants were losing their land, and traditional craftspeople were being put out of business by cheap British imports. But on the other hand, the British were pushing what they called social reforms. To a lot of Indians, these changes, new laws about religion, marriage, and customs, felt like a direct attack on their way of life, a sign that the British wanted to destroy their culture completely. Now, we keep mentioning the sepoys because, they're the ones who lit the fuse. So what exactly is a sepoy? Well, simply put, a sepoy was an Indian soldier who was hired to serve in the East India Company's army. And here's the irony. These were the very men who had conquered India for the British. They were the backbone of the company's power. So, why on earth would they turn on their bosses? Well, their list of complaints just kept getting longer and longer. The pay was bad, the conditions weren't great, but the real problem was that the British kept making new rules that violated their religious beliefs. For example, many sepoys believed that if they crossed the ocean, they would lose their caste, be shunned by their community. Then, in 1856, a new law made it mandatory for all new recruits to serve overseas if ordered. And then came the final straw, those infamous rifle cartridges, which were rumored to be greased with the fat of cows and pigs, a massive insult to both Hindus and Muslims. And look, you don't have to just take my word for it. Listen to this quote from Subadar Sitaram Pandey. He was a sepoy who served the British loyally for 48 years. He points directly to the British takeover of the Kingdom of Awadh, where tons of sepoys came from, as the moment they lost all trust. To them, it felt like a profound betrayal.
All right, so let's jump back to Delhi. The moment Bahadur Shah Zafar agreed, even reluctantly, to lead the rebellion, he gave it a symbol that everyone could rally behind. All of a sudden, this wasn't just a mutiny anymore. It was a war to kick the British out and restore an old way of life. The news spread like wildfire, and soon uprisings were erupting all across northern India. And leaders started popping up all over the place. In the city of Kanpur, you had Nana Sahib. He was the adopted son of the last Peshwa, who was the leader of the once mighty Maratha Empire. The British had cut off his inheritance, and now he saw his chance for revenge. He raised an army, kicked the British out of the city, and declared himself the new Peshwa. Meanwhile, in Lucknow, the capital of that kingdom of Awadh that the British had just taken over, the resistance was led by another incredible figure, Begum Hazrat Mahal. She completely refused to accept British rule and had her young son declared the new ruler, becoming a fierce symbol of defiance. And of course, we have to talk about the woman who became a legend, an absolute icon of this rebellion, Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi. After the British used that doctrine of lapse to steal her kingdom, she didn't just step aside. She joined the rebel sepoys and became one of the fiercest generals of the war, fighting side by side with Tantia Tope, who was Nana Sahib's top commander. And this just goes to show you how widespread it was. It wasn't just kings and queens. Over in Bihar, an elderly landlord, a zemindar named Kunwar Singh, joined the cause. He rallied his own forces and fought the British for months. People from all walks of life were uniting against a common enemy. Now, you can imagine the company was absolutely stunned. They were losing battle after battle, and they were seriously outnumbered. But they were not about to give up India, their most valuable possession. They decided they were going to crush this revolt with everything they had. They brought in reinforcements from Britain and passed harsh new laws to make it easier to punish the rebels. The British counterattack was absolutely brutal, and it was methodical. First, they went after the symbolic heart of the rebellion, Delhi. After a long and bloody siege, they recaptured it in September 1857. From there, they picked off the other rebel strongholds one by one. Lucknow fell the next March. Rani Lakshmibai was tragically killed in battle that June. It took 2 long years of brutal fighting, but slowly, grimly, the British clawed back control. And what about the emperor, the man who became the rebellion's figurehead? Well, his story has a really tragic end. Bahadur Shah Zafar was captured, put through a sham trial for treason, and exiled all the way to Rangoon in what is now Myanmar. He died there a few years later. His sons were captured and shot in cold blood. This wasn't just justice, it was a message. The Mughal dynasty was over. For good. Once the dust settled, the British knew things couldn't just go back to the way they were. The rebellion had proven that the East India Company's way of ruling was a total failure. So what came next was a complete redesign of how Britain would govern India, kicking off a whole new era of colonial rule. The single biggest change came from something called the Government of India Act of 1858. It basically flipped the whole script. First step, the East India Company was completely dissolved. All of its power was transferred directly to the British Queen and Parliament. Second, a new position was created in the British government, the Secretary of State for India. And third, the top British official in India, the Governor-General, got a new title, Viceroy, making him the direct representative of the Crown. This was the official start of the British Raj. They also made some huge policy changes, basically doing everything they could to make sure a rebellion like this never, ever happened again. They promised Indian rulers that their territory was now safe from being annexed. They totally changed the army, cutting the number of Indian soldiers and recruiting heavily from groups who had stayed loyal, like the Gurkhas and Sikhs. And this is a big one. They promised to stop interfering with Indian religious and social customs. And this new system, the British Raj, which was born out of the fire and chaos of 1857, wasn't just a temporary fix. It would define life in India for the next 90 years, right up until the country finally gained its independence in 1947. So, in the end, the rebellion failed. It didn't achieve its goal of throwing the British out. But it was the very first time that so many different people, rulers, soldiers, peasants, landlords, from different regions and religions, had all risen up together to fight a common enemy. So even though it was crushed, you have to ask yourself, did this violent, chaotic, and ultimately tragic event accidentally plant the seeds of a modern unified Indian nation? And that's the powerful question that 1857 leaves us with.